most difficult topics to talk about in today's society, and is arguably one of the most prevalent issues in today's society. With John Beeman's speech, The Lie That Invented Racism, he offers a suggested reason why racism may have started, and offers a new perspective towards people who may not understand it. John motivates people to look at their own role in society and the role they play in stopping racism. To talk about John himself a little bit, he's worked as a documentary maker and journalist for over 10 years, and he works currently at the Center for Documentary Studies at Duke University. There he produces a podcast called Scene on Radio. This is a Peabody podcast where he talks about some topics such as racism. His work has brought him all across the globe, including Studio 360 and BBC World Service and many other world studios. So he first gave a speech on the set of TED Talk in Charlottesville, Virginia. When he gave the speech, it was November of 2019, and since then it has had over 600,000 views on the TED Talk website, and it's still one of its top speeches for its racism category. So I'll show you a clip from his speech. During this part of his speech, he talks a lot about his logos and where he formed his ideas and the information that he got from them.
Slavery wasn't about race either, because no one had thought up race yet. So who did? I put that question to another leading historian, Ibram Kendi. I didn't expect he would answer the question in the form of one person's name and a date, as if we were talking about the light bulb. But he did. He said in his exhaustive research, he found what he believed to be the first articulation of racist ideas. And he named the culprit. This guy should be more famous or infamous. His name is Gomes de Zurara. Portuguese man, wrote a book in the 1450s in which he did something that no one had ever done before, according to Dr. Kendi. He lumped together all of the people of Africa, vast, diverse continent, and he described them as a distinct group, inferior and beastly. Never mind that in that pre-colonial time, some of the most sophisticated cultures in the world were in Africa. Why would this guy make this claim? Turns out it helps to follow the money. First of all, Zurara was hired to write that book by the Portuguese king. And just a few years before, slave traders, here we go, slave traders tied to the Portuguese crown had effectively pioneered the Atlantic slave trade. They were the first Europeans to sail directly to sub-Saharan Africa to kidnap and enslave African people. So it was suddenly really...
So John at this point kind of goes on to say like why they said that racism was a thing and split up races to make it seem a little bit more okay to people on why they would start slavery. So this just kind of made it more convenient for them at this time, and they realized that this was kind of just built off of a lie. So significance in history, at this time in November of 2019, at Syracuse University, there were racial protests going on after multiple students had received racial slurs written on their apartment buildings and doors of their apartments. These went on for a couple of weeks and caught national attention when it came out that reported targeted attacks were happening towards black students in September of 2019, and this wasn't really dealt with. Similarly, today there are many different racial protests going on, and it's happening across the nation from many different racial injustices. And Black Lives Matter is currently one of the biggest movements in U.S. history, according to the New York Times, so it's still very significant to today. John, like many of our speakers, uses many different rhetorical devices throughout his speech. One of the biggest ones he uses is this metaphor for racism. He says that many people believe that racism is kind of like a sports competition. So he says that on one side, you have your racists, and he alludes to the people in hoods, he says. Then on the other side, you have people of color, and that he felt himself as someone on the sidelines, as many people in the audience did, and that they are rooting for the people of color, but aren't actively participating in the game to stop racism. He says that he realizes this is wrong, and that there are no sidelines, and everyone is a part of it. and he continues to motivate people through that metaphor. He goes on and uses multiple hyperforas through his speech. One of the most prevalent he uses is, where did the idea of being white come from in the first place? He answers this in his clip during the speech, and he offers that this was kind of built off of a lie, and he answers just why some racial injustices, why many racial claims don't make sense, and he tries to motivate people to a new perspective through these thoughts. John also alludes to many different racial groups. During this particular allusion, he says, I'm not talking about those white people, the ones with the swastikas and the hoods and the tiki torches. So he alludes to these racist groups without saying them, and during this particular time, he is talking that those groups are seen as a problem by many people throughout the nation, but they are not the main problem. It's that everyone is part of the problem and needs to take an action in stopping racism. John also uses many different Aristotle thoughts of ethos, logos, and pathos. He uses his ethos as a dedicated and accredited journalist, and he talks about this in his speech. And he goes on, more importantly, to talk about his personal experiences growing up during the civil rights movement and talking with his parents about the work of Martin Luther King Jr. He uses a lot of different logos throughout his speech. We see in his clip a lot of his evidence from Dr. Ibram Kendi, and he also references historians Dr. Urban Painter. So he goes on and talks a lot about that. Pathos is one of the most important persuasion thoughts in his speech, because racism is such a tense subject that he creates small jokes and talks about his own experiences to ease the tension in the audience and build a relationship with the people of the audience to make a successful talking experience. This speech will endure for many different reasons. Most importantly, that the nation still struggles today to stick together and stand up against racism. So as long as this is happening, his speech will be needed and will endure. He says that ideally his speech should not be remembered at all, and in a perfect world, his speech should mean nothing. He says that inaction will make you complicit, and this is one of his main points in his speech, that if you aren't acting out against racism, you are part of the problem, and he talks about this multiple times. Through his speech, he is hoping to motivate people to a new perspective about racism and tries to motivate people to stop racism in their everyday lives and look in on their own personal prejudices. Thank you.